The observation deck hummed with the soft whir of environmental controls as Commander Kira smoothed the thermal blanket across her sleeping pod. It was a simple ritual, one she'd performed thousands of times across dozens of postings. Pull the corners tight. Tuck the edges. Fluff the pillow. Done. She didn't notice the 6 pairs of luminescent eyes watching her through the transparent aluminum partition. The Vrax cubs pressed their elongated snouts against the barrier, their obsidian scales catching the sterile light of the xenobiology wing. At 3 months old, they were already the size of earth wolves, with retractable claws that could shred durasteel and jaw strength that could crush bone. Their species had dominated the outer reaches for millennia, apex predators who knew no natural enemies. Until humans arrived. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Ran, the station's xenobiologist, as he reviewed the surveillance footage on his datapad. His compound eyes flickered with curiosity, a threnody quirk that Kira had learned to recognize as intense interest. The cubs have been observing Lieutenant Kira's evening routine for 6 standard cycles now. And? Kira asked, pausing in the doorway of her quarters. She'd grown accustomed to being studied by the various non-human crew members aboard Research Station Osiris-7. Humans were still relative newcomers to the galactic community, their habits endlessly fascinating to species that had been spacefaring for eons. Watch, Rand said, his 4-fingered hand gesturing toward the live feed from the cub's enclosure. On screen, the largest cub designated Vrax Prime by the research team approached the nest of thermal fabrics they'd been provided. The creature paused, tilted its triangular head, then began pawing at the material. It gripped the edge of the blanket with surprising delicacy, given those razor-sharp claws, and attempted to pull it across the nest. The blanket bunched awkwardly. Vrax Prime growled in frustration. Another cub smaller, with distinctive silver markings along its spine, chittered what Kira could only interpret as mockery. Then it approached its own nest and tried the same maneuver, this time managing to drag the blanket halfway across before it tangled around its hind leg. They "making their beds?" Kira's eyes widened. Attempting to, Rand corrected. And competing, observe. The remaining 4 cubs had abandoned their rest periods entirely. They circled their respective nests like gladiators entering an arena, sizing up the challenge. One lunged forward, attacking its blanket with the same ferocity it would use on prey. The fabric shredded instantly. The cub froze, looking between its claws and the destroyed blanket. A low, mournful keen echoed through the enclosure. Oh no, Kira whispered. Vrax Prime, meanwhile, had developed a new strategy. Instead of using its claws, it was using its snout to nudge the blanket into position, much like Kira had smoothed hers with her palms. The technique was crude, but effective. The blanket lay relatively flat across the nest. The other cubs stopped to watch. Then, with a movement that seemed almost rehearsed, Vrax Prime circled once, twice, and flopped onto the nest. It wriggled, pulling the edges of the blanket up with its body until it was partially covered. A moment of silence filled the enclosure. Then chaos erupted. All 5 remaining cubs with intact blankets attacked their nests simultaneously. They pushed, pulled, bit gently, and nudged. One particularly clever cub discovered it could pin the blanket with its tail while using its forelimbs to fold the edge. Another learned that rolling in the fabric could wrap it around its body. They're problem-solving, Kira breathed. Adapting techniques. Learning from each other? Indeed. Rand's mandibles clicked in. What she'd learned was the threnody equivalent of a smile. But there's more. Watch what happens when you enter their line of sight. Kira stepped closer to the observation window. Immediately, all 6 cubs froze. Their heads swiveled in unison, those glowing eyes locking onto her with predatory precision. She waved. Vrax Prime chittered urgently. The other cubs abandoned their nest-making and pressed against their own observation windows, desperate to see better. When Kira bent down and pretended to adjust an imaginary blanket in the air, miming her routine, the cubs went wild. They raced back to their nests. What followed was the most intense display of determination Kira had ever witnessed. The cubs didn't just try to replicate her movements, they refined them. Vrax Prime developed a technique of using its tail as a third hand, pinning the fabric while adjusting corners with precision that shouldn't have been possible for a creature built for combat. The silver-marked cub discovered that wetting its paws slightly increased grip without deploying claws. The smallest cub, one that had been struggling, watched the others intently. Then it approached its nest sideways, using the leverage of its body weight to pull the blanket taut before rolling onto it. Imperfect, but creative. Tandem, Rand said quietly. Kira checked her chrono. From the moment she'd mimed the action to when Vrax Prime settled into its perfectly tucked nest, 47 seconds. The next day, it took 39 seconds. The day after that, 28. Why? Kira asked, watching the cubs settle into sleep, each cocooned in their carefully arranged blankets. They're apex predators. What evolutionary advantage does bed-making provide? Rand's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps that's the wrong question, Commander. Perhaps we should ask, what did they observe that made them want to try? Kira thought back to her routine. The care she took. The small satisfaction of a task completed well, even when exhausted after a 16-hour shift. The tiny ritual of making order from chaos before surrendering to rest. They saw someone taking care of themselves, she said softly. Precisely. Vrax are pack hunters, but they don't nest. They sleep in communal piles for warmth and protection. Individual comfort isn't a concept in their psychology. Rand pulled up comparative data. Yet after observing human behavior, your behavior specifically, they've invented it. Not because they need it, but because because they saw it mattered to me, Kira finished. On screen, Vrax Prime stretched in its nest, the blanket pulled up to its chin in an almost perfect imitation of human sleeping posture. Its eyes dimmed to a soft glow contentment, the behavioral database confirmed. The smallest cub, watching from across the enclosure, began adjusting its own blanket, trying to achieve the same effect. The Galactic Council believes humans are dangerous because of your weapons, your adaptability, your refusal to accept limitations, Rand said. But this? This is what truly terrifies them. Making beds? No, Commander. Rand's compound eyes fixed on her with unusual intensity. The fact that apex predators, creatures who have dominated their ecosystem for millions of years, watch you perform a meaningless comfort ritual and decide entirely on their own that they want to be like you. Not because you force them. Not because you train them. But because something about the way you exist makes them want to try being more. Through the observation window, 6 juvenile killing machines slept peacefully in their handmade beds, competing even in dreams to see who could tuck themselves in best. And tomorrow, Kira knew they'd try to beat their record.